The gentlelady from Indiana, Ms. Spartz.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you, Congressman Biggs, for organizing that. And I'm glad we have a broad range of people, group of people, and I'm willing to collaborate with a variety of people who really care about this institution and care about democratizing this institution. As a former state senator, honestly, I was shocked when I first came in Congress. I'm like, OMG, what a show. It's a theater. And what I'm doing here. So I think it's extremely important to have that debate and deliberation. That's just how the greatest ideas are born. That's how we can serve the American people. And I think American people accept for us. And I think we have an opportunity to discuss it as an institution, what we can do to make sure that this institution is going to be a great institution. It's supposed to be, but it is not right now. I'll be honest with you. And it's very disappointing for me and for the American people. So what I would like to do, and when I actually was a state senator, we did some rules change, and I understand that we democratized our Senate before we elected pro tem. And we require, if there is a will of caucus and people vote to bring something to the floor, regardless what committee chairs feel, regardless what pro tem feel, it had to go to the floor. We passed some major, great legislation in the state of Indiana. So what I would like briefly to ask you, if you would say, you know the rules here much more deeply than I do, then what you briefly say, top 3 rules that would be very powerful and important for us to be able to agree on, that would make our institution more, deliberative body and more democratic. So I don't know if you can be quickly, each of you, add, what would you say? Or we can start with Rachel, since she had microphone. Okay.
Thank you. So I think the top 3 rules, I think, were mentioned almost by all of us as one of the number one would be the reinstating the majority of the majority rule. Nothing comes to the House floor unless it receives a vote from the majority of Republicans. This prevents a lot of what a lot of us saw as a misuse of the institution under the Boehner years, which was, bringing bills to the floor and passing them with Democratic votes.
Okay.
So I think that would be number one. Number 2, I've seen a proposal, I believe in the HFC book, talking about how amendments that receive at least 10% of support from the conference receive a vote. One of the biggest problems I see, going to the theme of my opening remarks, which is simply that, again, procedure is what makes representation matter. If members are not allowed to represent their constituents via amendment, via simply receiving a vote, no one's saying that the amendment has to pass, but the ability to actually have that vote, I think, is extremely important. And then ending the practice of martial law. I think it's absurd and offensive, frankly, that these bills are written, giant bills are written behind closed doors with the input of a handful of lobbyists and leadership staff and then dropped on the membership. You should all be offended by that. It's an insult, I think, to the positions that you hold and the voters you represent.
Yeah, I had open town halls, and I told my people, that we actually a speaker can just move everything, whatever he or she wants, on the floor, without committee, without deliberation, without debate, without looking, and without having any amendments to it. People were shocked. I'll be honest with you, on a bipartisan basis. People were shocked to hear that it actually exists in Congress, and it has to be fixed. Thank you. Okay, Paul?
Absolutely. Really just a repeat of the 3 I mentioned earlier. I think it may have even been before you got here, but super quick. So, open rules on all appropriate bills, broken up into smaller pieces, brought to the House floor before June 30th, no pre-printing requirement, just open, boom. Second thing, a true 72-hour clock rule, before any bill can come to the floor. And the third is authorizing on appropriations bills on the House floor. All 3, I think, are designed to empower individual members, especially conservative caucuses, to flourish, to have the conservative ideas and individual ideas flourish, get their time on the House floor, and then ideally land on the president's desk.
Ed?
Yeah. So it was talked about. Obviously, more open rules on the floor makes a lot of sense. I think one thing that is an underutilized sort of a thing that from the past is conference committees. Right now, we do a lot of ping-ponging back and forth, and they just have kind of these deals hatched in secret. I think having a more robust process where you have an open process on the floor where people can offer any amendments you want, and then basically have a real conference process where you can resolve some of those differences. I think that takes some of the pressure off the floor process and allows more participation without threatening to derail the bill. I think I would offer that you might consider abolishing the 4 party committees, the NRC, the DCCC, all those committees that really end up as like shakedown operations and somehow have a relationship with committee selection process. I don't really think that they serve a purpose in our democratic society, and I would abolish them. And then I think, one thing to think about is really more, coming from the Senate perspective, more collaboration with the Senate. Obviously, the Senate has its own problems. It used to be much more open. We used to joke as Senate staffers that we were worried about the Senate becoming the House. And then the Senate became worse than the House, and now the House is I think both chambers need to open up, and I would encourage you all to use your voice to encourage that on the other side.
It looks like my time is expired, but maybe maybe I could borrow 10 seconds from.
Yeah, Mr. Meadows, you can
Let me
answer.
jump in real quickly. Congresswoman, what you've pointed out is the biggest surprise to members who come here who have served in their legislative body in every single state in this union. They look at it and they say, well, at least we had a process that we may not have agreed with, but we understood and it actually worked. Here, we have essentially taken members who actually had authority in their state legislatures, and then we bring them here, and all it is where we're going to get together and hopefully vote on something that we have no input on. And so I would strongly encourage you to consider some of the things that have been mentioned. In addition to that, let's quit appropriating for things that are not authorized. The State Department hasn't been authorized in more than a decade, and yet, so we, as Congress, as the People's House, have not set their priorities, and we continue to fund it over and over again. And even if that's bringing a radical idea would bring to take the appropriations, so it's a little bit opposite of what Paul Teller is talking about. Bring the appropriations process and actually have an appropriations subcommittee in each one of your authorizing committees. You break it all up so when they're talking about priorities and funding, they go hand in glove. Congresswoman, right now, people will vote for the NDAA and vote against the funding. They get to go home and say that they voted for the troops and yet voted the opposite way when it comes to funding. And so we somehow have to bring those together.
Thank you so much. Now we'll yield 5 minutes to the gentlelady from Tennessee, Ms. Harshberger.